The alien jungle was alive with strange sounds. Thick vines hung from giant glowing trees, and the air carried the cries of unknown creatures. Every shadow seemed alive. Every rustle of leaves felt like a warning. The human named Daniel walked, slowly, his boots sinking into the soft moss that covered the ground. He held a small scanner in his hand, but even the device shook as if nervous. He had come to this planet on a survey mission, but the jungle was not friendly. It was hot, wet, and heavy with the smell of wild plants. Each step deeper made his heart beat harder, yet something inside pulled him forward. He felt watched, though he could not see who or what followed him. Suddenly, he heard a sound. It was not the growl of a beast nor the hiss of an insect. It was softer, like a small breath, like a sigh. Daniel froze, his hand reaching for the blaster on his hip. The bushes moved and he raised the weapon. But then he saw her. A girl stepped. Out from the thick leaves, her skin was pale with a faint silver glow, her hair long and tangled with bits of green leaves. Her eyes were wide, bright like stars, but she wore nothing to cover herself. She looked wild, fragile, and yet fearless. Daniel lowered his weapon slowly. She tilted her head at him, not afraid, only curious. Her bare feet touched the damp ground, and she moved closer without sound. Daniel's heart pounded. She was not like any alien he had seen before. She looked almost human, only her ears were sharp, and faint lines of bioluminescence ran across her skin, glowing in the dark. He tried to speak. "Hello." His voice cracked in the heavy air. The girl blinked, tilting her head more, copying the sound with her lips, but making no real words. It was clear she did not understand him. Still, she did not run. She stepped even closer, her eyes locked on his face. It felt as if she had never seen another being before. The jungle behind her suddenly roared. A deep growl echoed through the trees, shaking the ground under Daniel's boots. The girl's eyes widened, but she did not scream. Instead, she moved closer to him as if seeking protection. Daniel turned sharply and saw shadows moving in the trees. Large, hungry shapes circled them, alien beasts with glowing fangs. "Stay behind me," Daniel whispered, though he knew she could not understand. The girl crouched low, copying his tense posture. The beasts stepped out, huge wolf-like predators with 2 heads and spines across their backs. Their eyes burned. With hunger, Daniel's blaster hummed as he raised it, sweat rolling down his temple. The first beast leapt, claws outstretched. Daniel fired, the shot lighting up the jungle. The beast fell with a hiss, its body smoking, but the others circled, growling, waiting to strike. The girl did not run. She stayed close, her hand clutching his arm. Daniel felt the strange glow of her skin against his. It gave him strength he didn't know he had. 2 more beasts charged. Daniel fired again, then swung his arm to push the girl aside. She stumbled but watched with wide eyes, not in fear but in wonder. One beast snapped its jaws close to Daniel's leg, tearing at his boot. He kicked hard. Blasting it in the chest, the final creature backed away, snarling before disappearing into the thick vines. The jungle fell silent again. Only Daniel's heavy breathing filled the air. He lowered the blaster slowly, his arms shaking. The girl stood in front of him, eyes glowing softly, her expression unreadable. Then she did something unexpected. She touched his chest gently, right over his heart, as if to say, "Thank you." Though she had no words, Daniel swallowed hard. He had just met her, yet something in her touch felt powerful. This girl was not just a wild alien from the jungle. She was something more, something rare. He realized leaving her here would mean her death, and yet taking her with him would change his life forever. The girl tilted her head again, staring at him with quiet trust. The jungle around them whispered with danger still lurking. Daniel knew one thing. His mission had already changed. This was no longer about exploring the planet. It was about protecting her, and he didn't even know her name. Daniel stood in the quiet jungle, his blaster still warm in his hand. The girl's glowing fingers rested lightly on his chest, and her eyes held no fear, only curiosity. It was strange. Most creatures here ran at the sight of a weapon, but she seemed drawn to him. He wondered how long she had been living alone in this wild place, unclothed, untouched by civilization. He lowered his weapon fully and tried again. "My name is Daniel," he said slowly, pointing to himself. The girl blinked, then copied his movement, pointing to her own chest. No sound came, only a soft hum from her throat. Daniel smiled faintly, realizing she was trying. This was the first step, the first bridge across their worlds. The air grew heavy again, and strange insects buzzed around them. Daniel motioned for her to follow, taking careful steps through the vines. At first, she tilted her head in confusion, but when he walked forward and looked back, she understood. She followed, light on her feet, moving like a shadow through the leaves. Her bare skin glowed faintly in the dim light as if the jungle itself had claimed her. They reached a small clearing where a fallen tree stretched across a shallow stream. Daniel crouched, splashing his face with the cool water. The girl crouched too, copying him, her fingers dipping into the stream. She watched the ripples with wide eyes, then suddenly brought the water to her lips. Her face lit up with surprise as if she had never tasted fresh water this way before. Daniel realized she was learning from him. Every move, every gesture. He decided to test something. He picked up a smooth rock and held it up. "Stone," he said clearly. The girl tilted her head, then repeated softly, "Stone." The sound was broken but clear. Daniel felt a rush of excitement. She could learn. Not only was she alive, she was intelligent. But their moment was interrupted. A crack echoed in the trees, not from an animal, but from something heavier. Daniel stiffened, his hand gripping the blaster. Through the thick vines, he saw metallic glimmers. Not beasts this time. Machines. A patrol drone buzzed low, scanning the ground with red light. The colony had sent scouts into the jungle. If they saw her, questions would follow, and trouble would come. Daniel motioned quickly for the girl to stay low, pressing a finger to his lips. She copied him again, crouching, her glowing skin dimming as if she could control it. The drone passed overhead, its light sweeping across the clearing. Daniel held his breath. The girl stayed perfectly still, her wide eyes locked on his face. Only when the buzzing faded into the distance did he relax. "That was close," he whispered. She did not understand the words, but she reached out and touched his arm. Her touch was warm, grounding. As if she sensed his fear, Daniel realized. She trusted him completely now, and he, a stranger in her world, felt a strange duty to protect her. They walked on, the jungle opening slightly as the terrain rose. From a ridge, Daniel could see the distant lights of the colony far beyond the trees. It looked small from here, but to her it would be like stepping into another universe. The girl followed his gaze, tilting her head. For the first time, a flicker of worry crossed her glowing eyes. She was not afraid of the jungle, but of what lay outside it. Night fell quickly, the jungle turning darker. Strange cries echoed through. The trees and the ground shook with the movement of hidden beasts. Daniel built a small campfire with his survival kit, the flames crackling against the damp air. The girl sat across from him, watching the fire with awe. She reached her hand toward it but pulled back at the heat, giggling softly. It was the first sound of joy he had heard from her. The sound warmed him more than the fire. As they sat in the glow, Daniel tried again with words. "Daniel," he said, pointing to himself. "Duh, Neil." She repeated slowly, her lips curling as if tasting the name. He smiled, then pointed to her. Her eyes glowed softly as she thought. Then she made a sound, soft and musical. It was not in his language, but it was her name. Daniel nodded, repeating it the best he could. She smiled for the first time, her eyes bright like twin moons. The jungle hummed around them. Yet inside that small circle of firelight, something new was born. Trust, connection, a fragile bond between two different worlds. Daniel knew this was only the beginning. The colony would not understand. The officials would not approve. But, as the girl leaned closer to the fire, watching him with quiet wonder, Daniel decided he would not abandon her. No matter the cost, he would protect her. Because she was no longer just a wild creature in the jungle. She was someone, and now she was part of his story. The fire had burned down to glowing embers by the time Daniel decided it was safe to move. The girl, curled close to the warmth, opened her bright eyes when he stood. She tilted her head, waiting for him to give some signal. Daniel pointed toward the faint lights in the distance, the colony beyond the jungle. It was time to take her there, though part of him wondered if it was the right choice. She rose without question, following as he stepped through the vines. Her movements were silent, almost like she belonged to the shadows. The path was rough, roots twisting across the ground, insects buzzing like sparks in the air. Daniel cut through thick branches with his survival knife, while she walked easily behind him. At times she even pulled the vines aside for him, watching, carefully as if learning how humans moved. The closer they got to the edge of the jungle, the stranger things became for her. Small devices on Daniel's wrist beeped and glowed, and she leaned close to them, eyes wide. He explained in soft words she could not yet understand. Still, she mimicked the beeps with her voice, laughing quietly as if it was a game. Her joy softened the heavy silence of the jungle. But then came the first sign of trouble. As they neared the river that marked the halfway point, Daniel heard voices, not beasts this time, humans. A patrol was sweeping the area, their lamps cutting through the trees. Daniel cursed under his breath, motioning for her to crouch low. She copied him instantly, pressing her glowing skin into the shadows. Her bioluminescence dimmed again, fading until she almost vanished in the dark. Daniel stared in surprise. She could control her glow, hiding herself when danger was near. The patrol passed without noticing them, their voices fading into the night. Daniel exhaled, then glanced at her. She touched his arm again, as if saying she trusted his judgment. Something stirred in his chest. This bond was no accident. The jungle had introduced them. And now fate was carrying them toward something bigger. They reached the river at dawn, its surface silver under the rising sun. Daniel knelt to check the depth, then began building a small raft from branches and vine ropes. The girl watched carefully, then began copying his actions, pulling vines and tying knots with surprising skill. Together they worked, and soon a crude raft floated on the water. Daniel gestured for her to climb on first. She did, crouching low as if testing its strength, then gave him a faint nod. Daniel smiled and joined her, pushing the raft into the current. The river carried them slowly, the jungle sliding past like a dream. She dipped her hands into the water, splashing playfully, and looked at him with childlike wonder. Daniel tried not to laugh, but the sight eased the weight pressing on him. Still, his eyes stayed sharp, watching the skies for drones and the banks for predators, because he knew once they reached the colony, danger would not end. It would only change. Hours later, the trees thinned, and the edge of civilization appeared. Tall fences, metal gates, and towers rose against the sky. The girl froze, her glowing eyes widening. She crouched low on the raft, trembling slightly. Daniel realized she had never seen machines, never seen walls, never seen people beyond herself. To her, this was not safety. It was another kind of jungle, one made of iron. When they reached the bank, Daniel offered his hand. She hesitated, but then placed her glowing fingers in his palm. He helped her step onto the solid ground. Her bare feet touched the road that led to the gate, and she shivered. The ground was too smooth, too strange compared to the jungle floor she knew. Daniel pulled off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders, covering her unclothed body. She looked at him, confused at first, then slowly smiled. For the first time, she appeared less like a wild creature and more like a young woman discovering dignity. As they walked closer, the guards at the gate noticed. Their eyes went wide when they saw her. Whispers spread quickly. What is she? Where did she come from? Why is she with him? Daniel felt the weight of every stare. The girl gripped his arm tightly, pressing closer as fear finally reached her glowing eyes. He whispered, "It's all right. I'm here." Though, he knew trouble was coming. One guard stepped forward, his hand raised. "You can't bring her in," the guard said sharply. "She doesn't belong here." Daniel's jaw tightened. "She's not a threat," he said firmly. "She needs help." But the guard shook his head. She's not human. The girl looked between them, not understanding the words but sensing the conflict. Her grip tightened until Daniel's arm hurt. She pressed her forehead against him, hiding her face from the crowd. Daniel's heart ached. How could he explain to them that she was more than they saw? That she was not just an alien girl from the jungle. She was alive, aware, and already learning. The guards muttered. The crowd grew and Daniel felt the storm building. This was the first true test. Would he be allowed to protect her, or would they take her away the moment they stepped inside? The girl looked up at him again, her glowing eyes full of silent trust. And Daniel made a promise in his heart. No matter what happened at the gates of civilization, he would not abandon her. Not now, not ever. The gates finally opened after long arguing. Daniel insisted she was harmless, and the guards, though unsure, let him pass on strict warning. The girl clung to his arm, her glowing eyes watching everything as they stepped inside the colony. It was her first time outside the jungle, and the sight before her was overwhelming. Metal buildings rose high, their walls shining in the morning light. Machines rolled across, the streets humming with strange power. Voices filled the air. Hundreds of humans moving, talking, trading. For Daniel, these were normal sounds of daily life, but for her it was chaos. She pressed closer, her grip strong, every sound making her flinch. Daniel whispered gently, "It's all right." Though deep down he was worried too. The colony was not kind to outsiders, especially those who looked different, and she was more different than anyone had ever seen. Still, she needed clothes, food, and safety. So Daniel guided her toward the market district, hoping he could keep her calm. The marketplace was alive. With color and movement, stalls stood in neat rows, selling fruit, cloth, tools, and glowing crystals. Merchants shouted prices, children laughed, machines beeped. The girl's eyes widened, her head turning quickly, trying to see everything at once. She reached out toward bright fabrics, toward baskets of fruit, toward shiny glass. But each time Daniel pulled her hand back gently, shaking his head. She tilted her head in confusion, not understanding why she could not touch. Then it happened. She saw a stall of long dresses, bright with colors she had never imagined. Her glowing eyes lit up, and before Daniel could stop her, she stepped forward. Her hands ran over the soft fabric, pulling one close to her face as if to feel its warmth. The merchant, a large man with sharp eyes, shouted angrily, "Hey, you can't touch that without paying." The girl froze, not understanding his words, but the man stormed forward, grabbing the fabric from her hands. She cried out softly, her glow flickering in fear. Daniel quickly stepped in, raising his hands. "Wait, she doesn't know the rules," he said firmly. "I'll pay." But the merchant's voice grew louder, drawing a crowd. "She's stealing," he shouted. "Look at her, she's not even human." Whispers spread fast, people gathering around, faces filled with shock, some with fear, others with disgust. The girl pressed back against Daniel, clutching his sleeve, her glowing eyes darting nervously. Her breathing grew sharp, her chest rising. Fast as if she would run, Daniel knew if she bolted, they would never let her live inside the colony. He placed himself between her and the crowd, standing firm. "She's with me," Daniel said loudly, his voice cutting through the noise. "She didn't steal. She doesn't even understand your words." The merchant scowled. "Then take her out of here before she ruins my stall." But Daniel reached into his pouch and pulled out credits. He placed them on the counter with a hard glare. "For the dress," he said, "and for your silence, the merchant hesitated but took the credits quickly. Still, the crowd didn't leave. People whispered louder. "Why is he protecting her? What is she? Dangerous. Strange." The girl's glow dimmed almost completely, her body trembling against him. Daniel pulled the dress from the stall and gently draped it over her shoulders. "Here," he whispered softly. "It's yours now." She looked up at him, eyes wide, then down at the fabric covering her bare skin. For the first time she looked different, not like a wild creature, but like someone finding dignity. The crowd's whispers softened, some watching with surprise, some with quiet pity. Yet others still frowned, shaking their heads. Daniel ignored them, guiding her away from the stall. But as they moved deeper into the market, more problems appeared. 2 colony guards stepped into their path, their rifles slung at their sides. "Sir," one said coldly, "we've had complaints." Daniel's chest tightened. He knew what was coming. "She is not registered," the guard continued. "She has no ID, no papers, no right to be here." Daniel's jaw clenched. "She's with me," he said again, trying to stay calm. "That may be true," the guard replied. "But you can't keep her. She will be taken for questioning." The girl clung tighter, her glowing eyes wide. With fear, she didn't know the words, but she understood the threat. She shook her head, pressing herself against him as if begging not to be taken. Daniel's pulse raced. He wanted to fight, to shout, to protect her, but the rifles in the guard's hands reminded him of the risk. The market grew silent, all eyes watching. The girl looked at him with pure trust. Daniel realized the next choice he made would decide everything. If he gave her up, she would be gone forever, studied, locked away, maybe worse. If he resisted, he would be branded a traitor to his own people. But in that moment, when her glowing hand gripped his tightly, he already knew his answer. "No," Daniel said, his voice steady. The guards blinked, surprised at his defiance. "She stays with me," he repeated. "If you want to take her, you'll have to take me too." The crowd gasped, whispers erupting, like fire. The guards tightened their grip on their rifles, tension crackling in the air. The girl's glow brightened suddenly, a faint light wrapping both her and Daniel. People stepped back in shock, murmuring about omens, about strange power. And in that charged moment, Daniel knew the chaos of the marketplace was only the beginning. The crowd in the market held its breath. Daniel stood tall, the alien girl pressed close to his side, her glow pulsing faintly with fear. 2 colony guards blocked the path, their hands resting on their rifles. The air was thick with tension, and everyone waited to see who would move first. "She cannot remain here," the first guard said firmly. "She is unregistered, unknown, and dangerous." Daniel shook his head, his voice steady but sharp. "She is not dangerous," he said. "She's just a girl, and I will not hand her over." The second guard frowned, his eyes narrowing. "You think you can decide that alone?" he muttered. Daniel felt the girl's fingers dig into his sleeve, her body trembling. He looked down at her glowing eyes, filled with silent trust, and his resolve hardened. "She has done nothing wrong," Daniel said louder, his voice carrying across the market. "She is alive, intelligent, and learning. She deserves respect, not chains." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded quietly, others shook their heads, but all eyes remained locked on the scene. The first guard raised his hand as if to seize her. In that instant, Daniel stepped forward, his hand pushing the man's arm away. The movement was small, but it carried weight. The crowd gasped. The girl's glow flared brighter, wrapping Daniel's hand in soft light. The guard stepped back slightly, startled by the sudden glow. "What is this?" one of them whispered. Staring at her bioluminescent skin, Daniel didn't give them time to think. He reached into his pouch and pulled out more credits, throwing them on the nearest stall. "For everything she touched, for every complaint, it's paid," he said, sharply. "She has clothes, she has food, and she has me. There is no law broken here." The merchant from before quickly scooped up the credits, saying nothing. Others in the crowd shifted uncomfortably, some whispering, "He paid. He's right." The guards hesitated, unsure if pushing further would cause a riot. Daniel kept his body between them and the girl, his stance firm. He knew he couldn't fight an army, but he could fight for her dignity. Slowly the guards lowered their hands, though their eyes stayed cold. "This isn't over," one of them warned. "She will be reported and the officials will decide. Her fate." Daniel clenched his jaw but said nothing more. He guided the girl past them, his hand steady on her shoulder. The crowd parted reluctantly, some staring with suspicion, others with quiet respect. Once they were free of the market square, Daniel let out a heavy breath. The girl looked up at him, her glow soft and steady now. She touched the fabric of her new dress, then touched his chest as if to say thank you. No words were spoken, but the meaning was clear. He had stood for her and she knew it. As they walked through quieter streets, Daniel's mind raced. The officials would come. The colony would not let this pass. But in that moment, as he saw her smile faintly, he knew he could not regret his choice. She was no longer just a stranger from the jungle. She was someone he had taken responsibility for, and the bond between them was stronger than fear. They reached his small quarters at the edge of the colony. Daniel opened the door and let her inside. The girl stepped carefully, her glowing eyes scanning the strange room filled with tools, lights, and a soft bed. She touched the walls, the lamp, the table, each one filling her with wonder. When she sat on the edge of the bed, she pressed the blanket to her face with a smile. Daniel chuckled softly, shaking his head. Simple things were magic to her. He placed a small loaf of bread on the table and gestured for her to eat. She hesitated, then took it in her hands, sniffing it curiously before biting. Her eyes widened as the taste filled her mouth and she quickly took another bite. Daniel laughed quietly, the tension of the day fading for a moment. She was learning what comfort felt like, and it filled him with a strange peace. But the peace was short. A sharp knock sounded on the door. Daniel's heart sank. He knew it was too soon. When he opened the door, 2 officials stood there, not guards but men in clean uniforms. Their faces were serious, their eyes cold. "Daniel," one said, "we need to speak with you about the girl." Daniel's chest tightened, his hand gripping the frame of the door. "She's resting," he said firmly. "Whatever you want, it can wait." But the official shook his head. "This is no ordinary case. We believe she belongs to a tribe thought long extinct." The words sent a chill through Daniel's spine. He turned to look at her, sitting on the bed with glowing eyes. She tilted her head, watching him with quiet trust. If what they said was true, she was not only rare, she was priceless. And that meant powerful people would want her. Daniel felt the weight of his choice pressing harder than ever. The officials glanced past him into the room. "This girl is not yours to keep," one said coldly. "She belongs to science, to history, to the colony." Daniel's fists clenched. "No," he whispered under his breath, his voice low but steady. "She belongs to herself, and I will not let you take her." The officials exchanged sharp looks. Daniel closed the door before they could argue, leaning against it with a heavy breath. The girl stood now, her glowing light stronger as if she sensed the danger. Daniel met her eyes and made his silent promise again. No matter what came next, he would stand for her, even if it meant standing against the whole colony. The night felt heavier than usual. Daniel sat by the window of his small quarters, staring out at the colony streets. The girl slept curled on the bed, her faint glow lighting the dark room like a living lantern. He could not sleep, because the words of the officials echoed in his mind. She belongs to a tribe thought long extinct. Daniel knew the colony would not let this go. They would come back, not just with questions but with orders. The thought of her being locked away in labs, studied like a creature, twisted his stomach. He turned and looked at her peaceful face, her glowing lines moving gently with each breath. No, he could not allow it. The next morning, he decided to learn the truth himself. He powered up his old datapad connecting to the colony archives. The system buzzed, loading records. There it was. A forgotten entry about a people called the Lumerians. They were described as a forest-dwelling race, their skin glowing with natural light. Legends said they vanished generations ago, wiped out by disease and hunters, but some believed a few survived deep in the jungles. Daniel stared at the screen, his heart racing. The girl was not just an alien wanderer. She was the last light of her people. As he studied, he felt movement beside him. She had woken and now leaned over his shoulder, her glowing eyes scanning the screen. She tilted her head and then touched the glowing symbol of her tribe's name. Her lips parted and a soft musical sound came from her throat. Daniel realized she recognized it. This was her truth, and she had carried it in silence all along. He turned to her gently, pointing to the symbol. "Your people," he whispered. She blinked, then nodded slowly. A tear glistened at the corner of her eye, glowing faintly as it slid down her cheek. Daniel's chest ached at the sight. She was not only lost, she was the last memory of a people forgotten by time. But before he could say more, a loud bang shook the door. Daniel's hand went instantly. To his blaster, the girl jumped, her glow flaring bright with fear. The knock came again, this time stronger. "Open up," a voice demanded. "By order of the council, the girl is to be taken for study." Daniel cursed under his breath. He motioned quickly for her to hide, pulling her behind the small storage crates. She obeyed without hesitation, crouching low, her glow dimming until the room fell dark. The door creaked, then burst open as two guards stepped inside, rifles raised. Daniel stood tall, his blaster aimed back at them. "She's not here." He lied coldly. The guards scanned the room, their eyes sharp. One moved toward the bed, checking the blankets. Another walked toward the crates. The girl held her breath, her glow fading so faint it was almost invisible. Daniel's finger tightened on the trigger. Finally, the guards stepped back. "If you're hiding her, Daniel, it will cost you everything." One warned. "She's property of the council now." Daniel's jaw clenched. "She's not property," he snapped, his voice like steel. "She is alive. She belongs to no one but herself." The guards left, slamming the door behind them. Daniel sagged against the wall, his chest pounding. The girl crawled out slowly, her glowing eyes wide. She touched his arm, then his heart. As if thanking him again, Daniel realized she understood more than he thought. Even without full words, she knew what was happening, and she knew he was choosing her over everything else. That night, Daniel began teaching her more words. She smiled and repeated clearly, "Daniel." Then he pointed at her, waiting. She spoke softly, giving her name again, a sound filled with music. This time, Daniel repeated it perfectly. Her face lit up with joy, her glow brighter than ever. He pointed at the stars outside the window. "Sky." She copied him. "Sky." He pointed at the table. "Table." She echoed. "Table." Each word she learned, her smile grew and Daniel's heart grew heavier. She was not just surviving, she was becoming part of his world, and that made her even more dangerous to the council. Later, as she drifted to sleep again, Daniel whispered, to himself, "They won't take you. Not while I breathe." But even as he said it, he knew the colony would not stop. The officials wanted her for her blood, for her history, for the secrets her body carried. And if they could not take her by force, they would try by trick. The hidden truth was now clear. She was the last of her kind, a living treasure. But to Daniel, she was more than legend. She was someone who laughed at simple water ripples, who feared strange streets, who trusted him completely. And as the night stretched long, he made his silent vow again. He would fight for her, even if the whole colony turned against him. The colony stirred early, and Daniel could feel the weight of eyes on him as he moved through the streets. Rumors had already spread, about the glowing girl from the jungle, about his defiance against the guards, about the council's anger. He kept her close, a hood pulled over her head to hide the faint light from her skin. Still, she held tightly to his hand, her steps uncertain but trusting. He knew he could not hide forever. The officials would return, this time with more men. If he wanted to keep her safe, he had to make a choice now. Stay in the colony and watch her be taken, or run into the unknown with her at his side. That day, the council summoned him. Daniel was led into the main hall, a tall building of metal and glass. The girl stayed behind under guard, though her glowing eyes followed him as if begging him not to leave. Inside the hall, the council members sat, in rows, their faces stern. One stood, his voice sharp. "You have brought a wild being into our colony," he said. "You claim she is harmless, but she belongs to a race thought lost. She is not yours to keep." Daniel's voice was calm but firm. "She is not a wild thing. She is intelligent. She learns. She trusts. She is alive like us." The council shook their heads. "She is rare," one said coldly. "Her blood may hold cures. Her body may hold knowledge. She belongs to science." Daniel's fists clenched. "No," he said, his voice rising. She belongs to herself, not to you, not to me, not to anyone. The hall fell silent, the weight of his words hanging heavy. The council leader leaned forward, his eyes narrow. Then you must choose, Daniel. Hand her over to us or leave the colony forever stripped of your rights. Daniel's chest tightened. Leave the colony meant losing everything, his home, his safety, his future. But he looked back at the door where she waited and he already knew his answer. I choose her, Daniel said steadily. The council erupted in anger, voices overlapping, but Daniel no longer listened. He walked out of the hall, the guards stiffening as he approached. The girl stood waiting, her hood slipping back to reveal her glowing face. When she saw him, her eyes lit up with relief. She ran to him, gripping his hand tightly. Daniel looked at the guards, then at the crowd gathering outside. She is with me, he said, and I will protect her. Gasps spread through the people. Some shouted against him, calling him a fool, a traitor, but others looked at the girl and saw not danger but innocence. Her glow touched their hearts in ways words could not. Still, Daniel knew the colony's leaders would never allow them peace. That night he packed what little he could carry: food, water, a small map of the wilderness beyond the colony. The girl helped in her own way, carrying what she could, her glowing, hands steady. When the alarm sounded in the distance, Daniel knew the council had sent men to seize her. There was no more time. They slipped through the outer gates, moving into the dark plains beyond. The girl followed without fear, her glow a faint guide in the night. Behind them, voices shouted, lights swept the ground. But Daniel and the girl did not stop. They ran together, into the unknown. Hours later they paused at the edge of a canyon. The stars above stretched wide, endless and free. The girl sat on a rock, breathing heavy, her eyes still glowing softly. She looked at Daniel, tilting her head, then spoke. Her voice was soft, broken, but clear. Daniel, she said, her first word spoken without copying. Daniel froze, his chest aching. She had chosen to speak his name first. Her trust in him was complete. He knelt before her, placing his hand over hers. You're safe now, he whispered, though he knew the journey ahead would be hard. But in that moment, as her glow brightened and she leaned closer, he felt hope. They were no longer just a man and a lost girl from the jungle. They were something new, something stronger and far. Behind them, the colony lights faded. Daniel knew the council would hunt them, but he also knew the choice he made was right. Because sometimes humanity was not about laws or power, it was about standing for what was right. And in choosing her, he had chosen compassion over fear. He had chosen to protect the last light of her people, and she had chosen to trust him. Together they walked into the unknown horizon. Two worlds joined not by force, but by kindness. The jungle girl was no longer unclothed and alone. She was clothed in dignity, in trust and in the promise of a future, and Daniel, the human who had once come only to explore, had become her protector, her teacher, her family. Their story had only begun,